I am Bryce, 35 years old now, but still remember the day that changed everything. My parents handed my sister a check for $90,000 for her Paris studies, while telling me I deserved nothing. The contrast was stark, painful, and ultimately life-changing. I made the hardest decision that day, to cut them off completely and build my own life. Little did they know that 4 years later, my sister would drive past my $5 million house and call our father in tears. Before I tell you how I built my life from nothing after being abandoned by my own family, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to make it on your own. Growing up in a middle-class suburban neighborhood in Boston, my childhood looked picture-perfect from the outside. My father, Thomas, was a corporate lawyer at a prestigious firm, while my mother, Margaret, worked as a hospital administrator. We lived in a 4-bedroom colonial, with a manicured lawn and a 2-car garage. By all appearances, we were the ideal American family. That illusion cracked early for me, though not in ways outsiders would notice. My sister Sophia, younger by 4 years, was the unmistakable favorite from the moment she arrived. The signs were subtle at first, but grew more obvious with each passing year. On my 10th birthday, I received a modest party with a few friends and a store-bought cake. When Sophia turned 10, my parents rented a pony, hired a professional party planner, and invited half her school. My mother spent weeks preparing, something she never did for my celebrations. My father would work late most nights, but he never missed Sophia's school plays or recitals, my academic competitions and science fairs. He made it to maybe 1 in 4, always checking his watch throughout. Technology fascinated me from an early age. While other kids played video games, I wanted to know how they worked. At 12, I saved allowance money for months to buy components, and built my first computer from scratch. When I proudly showed it to my parents, my father glanced up from his newspaper and said, "That is nice, Bryce. Just don't expect me to fix it when it breaks." Meanwhile, Sophia's watercolor of our backyard, which honestly looked like most 12-year-old art projects, was framed and prominently displayed in our living room. During high school, I started a small tech repair service for neighbors, fixing computers, printers, and eventually smartphones. I earned enough to fund my own projects and buy better equipment. My parents called it playing with gadgets, and suggested I focus on real studies instead. That same year, Sophia joined the school choir, and my parents attended every single performance, beaming with pride at her mediocre alto. The pattern continued. I worked part-time throughout high school, while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I joined the robotics team, won state competitions, and even developed a simple app that the school adopted for their event calendar. None of this seemed to register with my parents. At Sophia's middle school graduation, she received a participation award for art. My parents took the entire family out to celebrate at an expensive restaurant and presented her with a new laptop. 3 years later, when I delivered the valedictorian speech at my high school graduation. They left early because Sophia had a dance recital that evening. "Your sister needs more encouragement," my mother would say. Whenever I pointed out the disparity, "You are naturally gifted, Bryce. You don't need the same kind of support," that became the refrain of my childhood and adolescence. Sophia needed support. Sophia needed encouragement. Sophia needed attention. And I needed nothing. I learned to become self-sufficient, not from wise parental guidance, but from necessity. I opened my own bank account at 16, saved carefully, and planned for college knowing that any help from my parents would be minimal at best. While Sophia received a car for her 16th birthday, I bought a used bicycle to get to my part-time job at the local electronics store. The dynamic wasn't lost on extended family or neighbors. My Uncle Jim once pulled me aside at a family barbecue. "You know, Bryce, I see what you are doing with your life. Keep going. Sometimes the ones who have to work harder for everything end up stronger in the end." It was one of the few times an adult had acknowledged the imbalance, and I held on to those words during many difficult moments. By the time I graduated high school, I had been accepted to several prestigious universities, including MIT and Carnegie Mellon. I dreamed of studying computer science and had the grades and extracurriculars to earn admission. But when acceptance letters arrived, reality hit hard. My parents sat me down for a practical conversation. "We haven't been able to save much for your college," my father explained. "Despite their combined six-figure income, you will need to consider state schools or significant loans." I already knew the answer, but I asked anyway. "What about all those college funds relatives gave to us as kids?" "Grandma always sent birthday checks, specifically for education." My mother shifted uncomfortably. "Well, those were mostly used for family expenses, and we're setting some aside for Sophia's future education." The pattern was clear, painful, but by then, familiar. I accepted a scholarship to the state university, which covered about half my tuition. For the rest, I took out loans and planned to work throughout college. It wasn't MIT, but it had a solid computer science program. And more importantly, it was a step toward independence. As I packed my belongings for the dorm, I watched my parents fuss over Sophia's 8th grade dance outfit, spending hundreds of dollars to make sure she had the perfect dress. I slipped away without goodbyes. A practice run for the bigger separation that would eventually come. College brought both freedom and hardship. I moved into a cramped dorm room with 2 other scholarship students, all of us working to make ends meet. While many freshmen were exploring campus life and attending parties, I juggled full-time studies with a 20-hour work week at the campus IT department. My academic performance never suffered despite the workload. I maintained a 3.8 GPA and quickly distinguished myself. In programming courses by sophomore year, professors were recommending me for paid research positions and competitive internships. Meanwhile, my connections to home grew increasingly strained. During my first semester, I called home weekly, hoping the distance might somehow improve our relationship. Most calls followed the same pattern. Brief questions about my classes, followed by extended updates about Sophia's high school adventures. Sophia made the junior varsity cheerleading squad. My mother announced during one call, her voice brimming with excitement. "We bought her all new equipment, and she looks so adorable in her uniform." "That is great," I replied, waiting for questions about my recent honors project selection. When none came, I volunteered. I was chosen for a special database optimization project. Only 2 students were selected. "That is nice, dear. Oh, before I forget, can you help Sophia with her math homework when you are home for Thanksgiving? She is struggling with algebra." Home visits became increasingly rare, as I found reasons to stay on campus during shorter breaks. I took summer classes and internships to advance my education and reduce the time spent in a house where I felt like a guest rather than family. During my junior year, I developed a promising idea for a cybersecurity application. My advanced programming professor saw potential in it and encouraged me to develop it further. "This could be marketable, Bryce. You should consider pursuing this after graduation or even sooner." Energized by this validation, I spent months refining the software while researching small business loans and startup costs. I estimated I would need about $20,000 to properly launch, for legal fees, better equipment, and initial marketing. With my technical skills, I could handle development and maintenance myself, keeping costs relatively low. That Christmas, I made a rare trip home, armed with a business plan and market research. My timing seemed perfect when my parents announced they had received unexpected bonuses at work. I waited until after dinner, when Sophia was video chatting with friends upstairs. "I have been working on a software project," I explained, sliding my carefully prepared proposal across the table. "My professors think it has real potential as a business. I have calculated startup costs and projected revenue. I could repay a loan within 2 years. With interest, my father glanced at the papers without really reading them. "Startups are risky, Bryce. Most fail within the first year. I know the statistics, but this fills a real need in small business security, and I have already developed a working prototype." My mother patted my hand condescendingly. "It is good to have dreams, sweetie, but maybe focus on graduating first and getting a stable job with benefits." I could do both, I persisted. I just need some initial investment. $20,000 would be enough to start. My father's eyebrows shot up. $20,000. That is completely out of the question before I could respond. The front door chimed. A delivery man stood there with an enormous package. My mother clapped her hands excitedly. Sophia's new bedroom furniture arrived. We are redoing her room as a surprise while she is at her friend's house tonight. Later, I discovered they had spent over $15,000 on this spontaneous bedroom makeover for my sister, who had complained that her existing furniture wasn't aesthetic enough for her social media photos. The divide continued to grow. During my senior year, I received an invitation to a prestigious technology conference in San Francisco. It represented an invaluable networking opportunity, but the travel expenses were beyond my budget. When I hesitantly asked my parents if they could help with the airfare, just the airfare, not the hotel or conference fees, they declined. "We are a little tight right now," my father said. "We just booked a family vacation to the Bahamas for spring break." "Great," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "When should I book my flight to meet you?" An awkward pause followed. "Well, the thing is," my mother began, "Sophia has reading week that same time, and she really needs the break from her studies. And you have your job and classes." It was clear. Family vacation didn't include me. I missed the technology conference. They went to the Bahamas. Sophia posted dozens of photos on social media, showing off new swimsuits and excursions my parents had funded. I worked double shifts at the campus at help desk to afford textbooks for my final semester. Holiday gatherings became exercises in invisibility. Sophia's life dominated every conversation. Her boyfriend troubles, her social activities, her struggle to maintain a C average, all received rapt attention from my parents and extended family. When relatives asked about my studies or plans, my parents often answered for me, minimizing achievements before I could speak. "Bryce does computer stuff," my father would say vaguely, very technical, not very exciting. By my final semester of college, I had secured a job offer from a small tech firm in Boston. The salary was modest, but fair for an entry-level position. More importantly, it offered stability and independence. I was determined to launch my security software on the side, even if it meant longer hours and bootstrapping the business myself. I had almost made it, almost escaped the orbit of my family's indifference. When the Paris bombshell dropped, spring of my senior year, with graduation just 2 months away, my mother called with an unusual request. "We want you to come home for dinner this weekend. The whole family will be there. Sophia has an announcement." Curious, despite myself, I made the 2-hour bus trip home that Saturday. Our house looked exactly the same, yet somehow I already felt like a visitor rather than a resident. Sophia had commandeered my old bedroom after I left for college, turning it into a creative studio for her various hobby attempts. Dinner was my mother's special occasion recipe, prime rib with all the trimmings. Expensive wine flowed freely, and even my father seemed unusually jovial. I sat quietly, wondering what milestone of Sophia's warranted such celebration. After dessert was served, Sophia clinked her glass dramatically. At 21, she was halfway through her 3rd year at a private liberal arts college, where she had changed majors 4 times and maintained a C average. Currently, she was pursuing a communications degree, though she rarely communicated any actual career plans. "I have amazing news," she announced, her face glowing. "I have been accepted to a special study abroad program in Paris." My parents erupted in applause, as if she had announced a cure for cancer. "Tell them the details, sweetheart," my mother urged. "It is a year-long art history program at this exclusive institute," Sophia explained. "We will study at all the famous museums, and there are amazing apartments in the student quarter. It is basically the opportunity of a lifetime." "That sounds expensive," I said, immediately regretting the practicality of my response. My father shot me a disapproving glance before turning back to Sophia. "Don't worry about that, princess. We have been saving for something special like this." Something cold and heavy settled in my stomach. I had worked multiple jobs throughout college, taken on substantial student debt, and been denied even minimal help for professional opportunities. Meanwhile, they had been saving for Sophia's Parisian adventure. "How much does a program like that cost?" I asked, struggling to keep my tone neutral. "Well, with tuition, housing in Paris, living expenses, and a little extra for cultural experiences." My mother trailed off, looking to my father. He puffed up proudly. "Around $90,000 all in. But you cannot put a price on education and cultural exposure." $90,000, the number hit me like a physical blow. That was more than 4 times what I had requested for my business startup. More than twice my outstanding student loans. That is a lot of money," I managed to say. "I didn't realize you had that kind of education fund available." Uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My mother busied herself clearing dessert plates. My father cleared his throat. "Well, we have always prioritized educational opportunities," he said vaguely. "I see. The pieces were falling into place with brutal clarity, so there was a college fund, just not for me." "Now, Bryce," my mother interjected, "your situation was different. You had scholarships and partial scholarships," I corrected. "I am graduating with $40,000 in student loans. Loans I will be paying off for years." Sophia rolled her eyes. "Here we go again. Can we not make my exciting news about Bryce's complaints?" My father's expression hardened. "Your sister is right. This is her moment. If you are jealous of her opportunity, that is your problem." "I am not jealous," I said, my voice remarkably steady despite the turmoil inside. "I am confused about the disparity in support. I worked throughout college, took loans, missed opportunities because you said you couldn't help financially. And now suddenly there is $90,000 for a year in Paris. Art history is a legitimate field of study," my mother said defensively. "I never said it wasn't. My question is about the unequal support." My father pushed back from the table. "You know, Bryce, this attitude is exactly why we have handled things the way we have. Sophia appreciates what we give her. You just demand more and more." The injustice of this statement was so breathtaking, I couldn't immediately respond. "Besides," he continued, "you are about to graduate. You have a job lined up. What do you need from us now?" I took a deep breath, actually. I was hoping to discuss that. "I still want to launch my cybersecurity software, with a small investment." "I could." "Not this again." My father interrupted. "We just told you we are committing significant resources to your sister's education. I am not asking for $90,000, I clarified. Just the $20,000 we discussed before. Or even $10,000 to start. I can show you the updated business plan with projected returns." My mother sighed dramatically. "Bryce, we have been through this. Startups are risky, riskier than spending $90,000 on an art history program in Paris." I couldn't help asking. "That is different," my father snapped. "Your sister needs this opportunity. You don't." "Why?" I pressed. "Why does Sophia need expensive support while I am expected to handle everything alone?" My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Because," my father said slowly, as if explaining to a child, "you don't deserve any help. You have always been self-sufficient. Sophia isn't like you. She requires nurturing and support to thrive." The words landed like a slap. "You don't deserve any help. Not we cannot afford it, or maybe later. Or even we don't believe in your business idea. Simply, I didn't deserve help, period." "I see," I said quietly, placing my napkin beside my half-eaten dessert. "Thank you for clarifying where I stand." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Sophia said with a dismissive wave. "They helped you too. They paid for your braces in middle school." "Remember?" My father nodded, as if this 13-year-old medical expense somehow balanced the scales. "We have always provided for both our children. But at some point, Bryce, you need to grow up and handle your own problems." I stood from the table, suddenly certain of what I needed to do. "You are right. I do need to handle my own problems. And the first problem I am going to handle is the illusion that I have a supportive family." "What is that supposed to mean?" my mother asked, alarm creeping into her voice. It means I am done. Done trying to earn approval that clearly isn't available to me. Done watching Sophia receive endless support while I am told I don't deserve help. Done with the double standards and the gaslighting. Now wait just a minute, my father began, his face reddening. No, I have waited years, I interrupted. I have worked hard, excelled academically, behaved responsibly, and still somehow failed to deserve basic parental support. Meanwhile, Sophia gets $90,000 for a year in Paris after changing majors 4 times and maintaining mediocre grades. The message is clear. I walk to the door, turning back one last time. Congratulations on Paris, Sophia. I hope you actually attend some classes between shopping trips. Mom, Dad, goodbye. Enjoy the perfect family you clearly wanted all along. The one without me in it. My mother called after me, her voice caught between anger and panic. Bryce, don't be ridiculous. You are overreacting. But I was already walking down the driveway, the cool evening air clearing my head for what felt like the first time in years. I didn't look back. The bus ride back to campus that night was a blur. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from my mother, alternating between guilt trips. How could you ruin your sister's special dinner? And minimizing my concerns. You are being too sensitive. My father sent a single text. When you are ready to apologize for your behavior, we will talk. I turned off my phone and stared out the window at the passing darkness. There was a strange sense of both loss and liberation washing over me. By the time I reached my apartment near campus, I had made my decision. This break needed to be complete. The next morning, I changed my phone number. I adjusted privacy settings on social media and removed family members from my contacts. I informed the university registrar that my parents should not receive any information about my graduation or academic standing. I was cutting the cord entirely. Those final months of college were intensely focused. I threw myself into completing my degree while working full-time at my IT job. Without the emotional drain of family dynamics, I found new reserves of energy and determination. My senior project won departmental honors, and I graduated cum laude despite my punishing work schedule. No one from my family attended graduation. I told myself it didn't matter. I had one friend take a photo of me in cap and gown, which I later framed for my own satisfaction. It was the first of many milestones I would celebrate alone. My entry-level programming job started immediately after graduation. The salary was modest, barely enough to cover rent for a tiny studio apartment in a rough neighborhood, student loan payments, and basic living expenses. But it was mine, earned through my skills and hard work, not contingent on anyone's approval or arbitrary assessment of what I deserved. Those first months of true independence were brutally difficult. My apartment was the size of a large closet with a hot plate, instead of a proper kitchen, and a shower that alternated between freezing and scalding, with no warning. I slept on an air mattress that slowly deflated through the night. Ramen noodles became both breakfast and dinner most days. But still, there was a strange peace in controlling my own circumstances, however humble. Weekends and evenings were devoted to developing my cybersecurity software. Without startup capital, progress was painfully slow. I worked on a second-hand laptop that overheated after 2 hours of use, forcing me to place it on an improvised cooling system made from frozen water bottles. 6 months into this new life, a colleague at work introduced me to his former roommate Jordan, who had recently sold his tech company and was looking to invest in promising startups. After hearing my elevator pitch, Jordan agreed to meet for coffee to discuss my software concept. I spent a week preparing for that meeting, refining my business plan and creating demonstrations of the software's capabilities. On the day of our meeting, the cafe's internet failed, forcing me to present using screenshots and cached demonstrations. I was certain I had blown my chance. To my surprise, Jordan called the next day. "Your preparation impressed me more than a slick presentation would have," he said, "and your solutions for small business security fill a real gap in the market. I would like to make an initial investment, the amount $50,000 for 20% equity, was more than twice what I had originally hoped to secure. It wasn't venture capital millions, but it was enough to properly launch. I signed the paperwork with hands that trembled slightly from a mixture of excitement and disbelief. With Jordan's investment, I rented a small desk at a co-working space, purchased proper development equipment, and hired a part-time legal consultant to help with patents and business formation. I continued my day job working on my company from 6 in the evening until midnight most weekdays and all weekend. The work was exhausting but purposeful. Still, there were moments of profound loneliness. Holiday seasons were particularly difficult. I declined invitations from coworkers who pitied the guy with apparently no family to visit. Instead, I worked through Thanksgiving and Christmas, telling myself the sacrifice would be worth it. On my birthday that first year, I received a card from my mother. The message was brief: "Thinking of you," with no mention of my abrupt departure or the confrontation that preceded it. I stared at it for a long time before placing it unopened in my desk drawer. Some wounds weren't ready to be reopened. Through mutual acquaintances, I occasionally heard news about my family. Sophia had indeed gone to Paris, posting endless photos of cafe outings and shopping excursions, with surprisingly few mentions of classes or museums. My parents boasted to neighbors about their daughter's cultural immersion experience, apparently unbothered by the cost or questionable educational value. One night, during a particularly low moment, I nearly called home. It was 3 in the morning. I had been debugging code for 14 hours straight. The loneliness felt physical, a weight pressing on my chest. I found myself wondering if I had overreacted. If cutting ties had been too extreme. My finger hovered over the phone. Then I remembered my father's words. "You don't deserve any help." I put the phone down and returned to my work. The code finally compiled successfully at 4:30, and I collapsed onto my air mattress, emotionally and physically spent. That pattern continued for months. Moments of doubt followed by renewed determination. Each small success with my software company helped quiet the voices of insecurity. Each minor setback triggered memories of my father's dismissal. I was perpetually caught between proving him wrong and wondering if he might have been right. After a full year of independence, I had graduated from the air mattress to a proper bed, moved to a slightly better apartment, and was closing in on the first major release of my security software. I had also begun dating casually, though I kept people at arm's length, wary of rejection. One evening, Jordan invited me to a networking event for tech entrepreneurs. "You need to start building connections," he insisted. "No successful business exists in isolation." Reluctantly, I attended, wearing the one decent suit I owned. At the event, I met several established tech founders who shared stories of their early struggles. One woman described living in her car while coding her first successful app. Another had maxed out 12 credit cards before securing proper funding. Everyone thinks success happens overnight. One veteran entrepreneur told me, "They don't see the years of failure and sacrifice behind it for the first time." I realized I wasn't alone in my struggle. Different circumstances, perhaps, but similar challenges and doubts. I left the event with business cards, potential mentors, and something even more valuable: a sense of belonging to a community that valued determination and resilience. As my company approached its second year, things began to shift. A small business association tested my security suite and published a glowing review. Orders trickled in, then steadily increased. Jordan introduced me to additional investors, and we secured another round of funding. I hired my first employee, then my second. We moved from the co-working space to a small office of our own. I finally quit my day job to focus entirely on my company. Each step forward felt like both a personal victory and a quiet rebuttal to those who had deemed me unworthy of support. Through it all, I maintained my distance from my family. Sophia eventually returned from Paris without completing the program, apparently bored with art history. After the initial glamour wore off, according to mutual connections, my parents bought her a condo and continued to fund her lifestyle while she found herself. I felt no satisfaction in this news, only a dull ache for what might have been in a different family. On difficult days, I reminded myself that being cut off had ultimately forced me to find my own path. Perhaps in some twisted way, my parents had been right. I didn't need their help, but that truth didn't excuse their favoritism, or heal the wound of being deemed less deserving than my sister. As my company grew, so did my sense of self-worth, not tied to family approval, but to my own achievements and the relationships I was building with people who valued me for myself. The tiny studio apartment became a respectable one-bedroom. Then eventually a modest house in an up-and-coming neighborhood. With each upward step, I expected some sense of vindication, some feeling of showing them. It never really came success. I was learning felt hollow when pursued for the wrong reasons. I began to focus less on proving my worth to absent parents, and more on creating something meaningful on my own terms. By the third year, my company had 25 employees and had expanded beyond the original security software to include additional products for small business IT management. We were profitable, growing, and gaining industry recognition. I had finally found solid ground after years of uncertainty, and then came the acquisition offer that would change everything. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, seemingly routine among dozens of others in my inbox. The sender was the vice president of acquisitions at TechGuard, one of the largest cybersecurity companies in the country. The subject line was simple: interest in your company. I almost dismissed it as a sales pitch or recruiting attempt. Instead, it was an invitation to discuss the potential acquisition of my company. The figure mentioned casually at the end of the email, initial valuation in the $60-75 million range, had me reading the message 3 times to ensure I hadn't misunderstood. I called Jordan immediately. Is this legitimate? Could they really be offering that much? Your technology is innovative, and your market penetration impressive. He replied calmly, I am only surprised it didn't happen sooner. We should meet to discuss how to approach negotiations. The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, due diligence reviews, and legal consultations. TechGuard was indeed serious, and their final offer was $75 million, with retention bonuses for key team members and a consulting role for me during the transition period. The night before signing the final papers, I sat alone on the deck of my modest home, attempting to process the imminent transformation of my life. In less than 24 hours, I would go from a moderately successful entrepreneur to a multimillionaire. The kid who had once been told he didn't deserve help would have more financial security than his parents could ever imagine. Yet amid the excitement, there was a hollow space that success couldn't fill. The people who should have been proudest of my achievements wouldn't be there to witness this milestone. Not that I wanted to share it with them. The wound was still too deep for that. But their absence was a reminder of what our family could have been. After the acquisition was finalized, I took 2 weeks off. My first real break in 4 years. I traveled to the coast, rented a beachfront cottage, and spent days walking along the shore, contemplating my next steps. At 32, I had achieved the kind of financial success most people spend lifetimes pursuing. The question now was what to do with it. Upon returning, I made 3 decisions. First, I would become an angel investor for promising startups, particularly those founded by young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. Second, I would establish a scholarship fund for computer science students who were working their way through college without family support. And third, I would buy the house I had always dreamed of. Not as a status symbol, but as a sanctuary, truly my own. The house hunting process led me to an architectural masterpiece in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods, the $5 million property featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, a state-of-the-art home office, and grounds designed for both beauty and privacy. It was extravagant by any standard, but after years of sacrifice, I allowed myself this one significant indulgence. The first few months in the new house felt surreal. After so long in cramped apartments, the space seemed excessive for one person. But gradually, it became home. I filled it with books. I had always wanted to read, technology that reflected my passions, and art that spoke to me. For the first time, I was creating a space that was entirely mine without compromise or apology. My new role as an angel investor introduced me to dozens of young entrepreneurs with brilliant ideas and limited resources. I found particular satisfaction in funding founders who reminded me of my younger self, technically gifted, but lacking the connections and capital that smoothed the path for more privileged peers. One such entrepreneur was Alicia, a 24-year-old developer who had created an innovative educational platform while working 3 jobs to support her younger siblings. During our first meeting, she mentioned applying for a bank loan and being rejected 9 times. "I could just write you a check right now," I told her after reviewing her business plan. "But that wouldn't give you the full benefit of what I can offer. Let me introduce you to legal advisors, marketing consultants, and potential clients. The money matters. The network matters more." Alicia's company became my first major success as an investor, growing rapidly and eventually partnering with school districts nationwide. Watching her flourish validated my new purpose in ways that simply accumulating wealth never could. Similarly, the scholarship fund I established helped dozens of students complete their education without the crushing debt I had carried. Each semester, I reviewed applications personally, looking for students who demonstrated not just academic potential, but resilience in the face of family or financial challenges. Through these endeavors, I was building a different kind of family, a network of mentees, colleagues, and friends connected by shared values, rather than DNA. For the first time since cutting ties with my parents, I felt part of something larger than myself, something meaningful and sustaining. My personal life evolved as well. The financial security and emotional growth allowed me to approach relationships with greater openness. I began dating Amanda, a children's book author I met at a charity event. Unlike previous relationships stalled by my reluctance to discuss family, with Amanda I shared the full story early on. "Family isn't always who you are born to," she said, after hearing about my parents. "Sometimes it is who you choose, and who chooses you back." Every day her perspective, shaped by her own complicated family history, resonated deeply. Our relationship progressed naturally, built on mutual respect and understanding rather than need or obligation. Through mutual acquaintances, I occasionally heard updates about my biological family. Sophia had cycled through several career attempts: interior design, social media influencing, yoga instruction, none lasting more than a few months. My parents continued to subsidize her lifestyle, while complaining about their dwindling retirement savings. One former neighbor reported that my father frequently bragged about his successful son in technology to colleagues, conveniently omitting the complete estrangement and lack of support. This revisionist history might have angered me once, but now it seemed merely sad. A fiction, created to preserve his self-image as a good parent. Nearly 4 years after cutting ties with my family, my life had transformed beyond recognition. The struggling programmer on an air mattress was now a respected investor and mentor, living in one of the city's premier properties, engaged to a wonderful woman, and making a meaningful difference in others' lives. I had proven my father wrong in the most decisive way possible. I hadn't just survived without their help. I had thrived beyond any expectation. Yet the victory brought less satisfaction than I had imagined in those early angry days. Success, I had learned, was most meaningful when pursued for its own sake, not as vindication against those who had underestimated you. And then, on an ordinary Saturday afternoon, worlds collided in a way I never anticipated. I was in the front yard discussing landscape improvements with the gardener, when a silver sedan slowed dramatically while passing my house. The car continued a few yards before pulling over. Through the side mirror, I could see 2 women inside, one pointing toward my property while speaking animatedly. Something about the profile of the passenger seemed vaguely familiar, but I returned my attention to the gardener's suggestions for the Japanese maple installation. A few minutes later, the garden gate creaked. I turned to find Sophia standing there, looking both older And somehow exactly the same as when I would last seen her 4 years earlier, Bryce, she said, as if unsure, despite having clearly sought me out. Is this? Do you live here? The gardener glanced between us. Sensing tension, we can finish this discussion later. Mr. Warner, he said tactfully, gathering his tablet and samples, once alone. Sophia and I regarded each other in awkward silence. She looked expensive but tired, designer clothes and perfect makeup contrasting with the strain around her eyes. How did you find me? I finally asked. I didn't. Not exactly, she admitted. My friend Melissa lives in this neighborhood. We were heading to her place when I saw the name Warner on your mailbox. I couldn't believe it might be you. Another pause stretched between us. So, she gestured at the house. All this is yours. For real, I nodded. For about 9 months now, but this is like a $5 million house. These are the most expensive homes in the city. 5 actually, I corrected, immediately regretting the precision that sounded like boasting. Sophia's expression cycled through disbelief, confusion, and something that looked remarkably like resentment. Without another word, she turned and walked back to her friend's car. Through the open window, I could see her pull out her phone and make a call. Her gestures agitated. I considered going after her but decided against it. Whatever was happening, I had learned long ago that Sophia's drama wasn't my responsibility. I returned to the house, unsettled, but determined not to let the encounter disrupt my day. Less than an hour later, my security system alerted me to visitors at the gate. The camera showed my parents standing at the entrance, my father repeatedly pressing the intercom button, while my mother peered anxiously at the house. For a moment, I considered not answering. 4 years of silence had brought peace I was reluctant to disturb, but curiosity won out. I pressed the intercom. Yes, Bryce. My father's voice, instantly recognizable, despite the years. We need to talk to you, Sophia told us. We just want to talk, I hesitated, then pressed the button to open the gate. Some conversations were inevitable, and perhaps this one was overdue. They looked older, of course. My father's hair had gone completely gray, and my mother's face showed lines I didn't remember. They stood in my foyer, taking in the soaring ceilings and elegant furnishings, with poorly concealed amazement. You have done well for yourself, my father said, an odd mix of pride and defensiveness in his tone. Yes, I replied simply. Why didn't you tell us? My mother asked, hurt evident in her voice. All these years, not a word about your success. Why would I? The last significant conversation we had, you made it clear. I didn't deserve your support. Why would I share my achievements with people who didn't believe in me? My father shifted uncomfortably. That was a misunderstanding. We always knew you would do well. You were always so capable that I didn't deserve help. I repeated his words back to him. Those were your exact words, Dad. Not we cannot afford it, or we don't believe in your business idea. You specifically said I didn't deserve help. People say things they don't mean when they are frustrated, my mother interjected. You just walked out and cut us off completely. Over one heated conversation, I laughed without humor. It wasn't one conversation. It was a lifetime of being treated as less deserving than Sophia. The Paris money was just the final evidence of what I had always suspected, that there were two standards in our family, and I would never meet the one that earned your support. That is not fair, my father began. No, it wasn't fair. I agreed. None of it was fair, but it was real, and it shaped our family in ways you have never acknowledged. A tense silence filled the room. Well, my mother said eventually, her voice artificially bright. What matters is that we are all together now. And look how well everything turned out. You have clearly done amazingly well for yourself. We always knew you would. The revision of history was breathtaking in its audacity. Did Sophia call you right after seeing my house? I asked, changing direction. My father looked uncomfortable. She was upset, she said. She couldn't understand why you have all this when she is struggling. And there it was. The real reason for their sudden appearance in my life. Let me guess, I said. keeping my voice level. "Sophia's having financial difficulties, and she is upset that I apparently have money while she doesn't, and you came too." "What?" "Ask for my help. See if there is some way to restore balance to your perfect family system, where she gets everything, and I get nothing." My mother's expression confirmed my suspicion. She has had some setbacks. The economy is difficult, and her creative businesses haven't quite taken off yet. We have helped as much as we can, but our retirement savings have been depleted supporting Sophia. I finished for her. "And now you have discovered another potential resource. The son you discarded might be useful after all." "That is a terrible way to put it." My father said angrily, "We are family. Family helps each other." "Family," I repeated. "Tell me, where was this family helps each other philosophy? When I was working 3 jobs to pay for college, or when I needed startup capital, or when I was sleeping on an air mattress and eating ramen for every meal while building the business that led to all this?" They had no answer. "I built this life without you," I continued quietly. "Without your emotional support, without your financial help, without your belief in me. I don't say that to hurt you, but because it is the truth. And now that the results are visible, you want to be part of it." "You are our son," my mother said, tears forming. "Whatever mistakes we made, we love you." Perhaps once those words would have moved me. Now they seemed hollow convenient. "I am not going to be vindictive," I said after a moment. "That is not who I want to be. But I am also not going to pretend the past didn't happen, or that you can walk back into my life because it is suddenly advantageous." "So, you will not help your sister?" my father asked, his tone hardening. "After all your success, you would let her struggle." The irony was almost too perfect. "I believe your exact philosophy was that struggling builds character and self-sufficiency. That helping someone who should handle their own problems is counterproductive. Isn't that right?" My father's face reddened. "That is different. Your sister needs support to thrive." "Yes, I remember that part too." I walked toward the door, signaling the end of our conversation. "I wish Sophia well, truly, but her financial situation isn't my responsibility. Any more than mine was yours when I needed help." "You are being petty and vindictive," my father said, anger replacing his earlier conciliatory tone. "I thought you were better than that." "No, Dad. I am applying the same standard to Sophia that you applied to me. The only difference is that I am being honest about it, rather than dressing it up as some character-building philosophy." My mother tried one last approach. "Think about how this looks, Bryce. People will talk. They will wonder why you will not help your family when you clearly have the means." "Let them wonder," I replied. "The people who matter in my life know the full story. The rest is just noise," as they turn to leave, visibly frustrated by their failed mission. I felt no triumph or vindication, just a quiet sadness for what our family could have been, and a renewed appreciation for the life and relationships I had built without them. "For what it is worth," I said as they reached the door, "I don't wish you ill. I hope things work out for all of you. But my boundaries stand. This house and everything I have built, they are mine. Earned through work you didn't support and sacrifices you never saw." After they left, I stood in the quiet of my home, processing the encounter. There was no satisfaction in turning them away, no pleasure in maintaining the estrangement. Just the necessary protection of the life I had fought so hard to create. Later that evening, Amanda called. "How was your day?" she asked. Her voice a welcome connection to my real life. "My chosen family unexpected," I replied. But clarifying, sometimes the hardest boundaries to maintain are the most necessary ones, and sometimes the most painful separations lead to the most authentic connections elsewhere. In the weeks following my family's unexpected visit, I found myself reflecting deeply on the journey that had brought me here. The encounter had reopened old wounds, but also provided a certain closure. Seeing my parents' transparent attempt to access my resources rather than genuinely reconnect confirmed that my decision to maintain distance had been necessary for my well-being. Amanda suggested I might benefit from speaking with a therapist. "Not because there is anything wrong with how you handled it," she clarified, but because carrying these experiences alone is a heavy burden. I took her advice, finding a counselor specializing in family estrangement. Dr. Harmon helped me understand that my experience was far from unique. Many successful people come from families that failed to nurture them, she explained. The pain doesn't disappear with achievement, but you can integrate it into a meaningful narrative about resilience and self-creation. Through these sessions, I began to see my story not just as one of parental favoritism and rejection, but of determining my own worth when others wouldn't. The therapist helped me recognize that while my parents' treatment had been genuinely unfair, their limitations weren't a reflection of my value. "You have built an impressive life," Dr. Harmon noted during one session, "but I am most impressed by how you have channeled your experience into helping others facing similar challenges." She was referring to my scholarship foundation, which had expanded to include mentorship programs for students estranged from family support systems. Working with these young people gave purpose to my own painful history, transforming it from merely personal trauma to a source of understanding and connection. One scholarship recipient, Devin, had been disowned by his parents after choosing engineering over the family business. "When you have been told you are making the wrong choice, succeeding becomes almost an obligation," he told me during a mentoring session. "You have to prove it wasn't a mistake." His words resonated deeply. Much of my early drive had come from a determination to prove my parents wrong. But somewhere along the way, success had become its own reward. The satisfaction of creation rather than vindication. My relationship with Amanda deepened into an engagement and eventually marriage. Our wedding was small, but meaningful. Attended by friends who had become family through choice rather than blood. Jordan served as my best man, the friend who had believed in my business when no one else would. During the reception, Jordan raised his glass for a toast. To Bryce, who taught me that true success isn't measured in dollars but in the integrity with which you build your life. And to Amanda, who saw in him what his family couldn't. A man of extraordinary worth, building a life with Amanda brought healing I hadn't known I needed. Her own family background, raised by a single mother who had sacrificed everything for her education, gave her a perspective that complemented mine. Together, we discussed the family we hoped to create someday. One based on unconditional support and recognition of each child's unique path. "If we have multiple children," I told her one evening, "I want them all to know they are equally valued, different, but equally deserving of our support. That starts with us healing enough to not repeat the patterns we experienced." She wisely noted, "Through mutual connections, I occasionally heard news about my biological family. Sophia had moved back in with my parents, apparently, still unable to support herself despite approaching 30. My parents had delayed retirement. Their savings substantially reduced. There were rumors of my father's health declining under the stress. I felt no vindictive pleasure in these reports. Only sadness for the unnecessary struggle caused by patterns they seemed unable to recognize or change. Once, during a vulnerable moment, I considered reaching out with financial assistance, anonymously, perhaps. But Amanda gently reminded me of the difference between generosity and enabling. "They are repeating the same dynamic with Sophia that created the problem in the first place," she observed. More money wouldn't change the underlying issues. She was right, of course. The problem had never been merely financial but fundamental to how my parents viewed responsibility, support, and family obligation. 2 years after the encounter at my home, I received an unexpected email from Sophia. Unlike our parents' approach, hers contained a hint of genuine self-reflection. "I still don't fully understand what happened between you and our parents, but I am beginning to see patterns that might explain your perspective. My therapist suggested I reach out, not to ask for anything, but to acknowledge that your experience in our family was different from mine, in ways I never recognized." It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was the first indication that anyone in my family might be developing insight into our dysfunctional dynamic. I responded briefly but kindly, thanking her for the message and wishing her well in her therapy journey. As my business investments flourished and Amanda's writing career took off, we discussed the meaning of financial security beyond mere comfort. "Money is just potential energy," I told her. It matters what you convert it into. For us, that meant expanding the scholarship foundation, supporting educational initiatives in underserved communities, and providing seed funding to entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. The wealth that had once seemed like an end goal became instead a resource for creating opportunity for others. When Amanda and I welcomed our first child, a daughter we named Eliza, the circle seemed to close in some profound way. Holding my newborn daughter, I made silent promises about the parent I would strive to be present. Supportive, recognizing her inherent worth regardless of her choices or achievements. She is perfect, Amanda whispered, as we watched our daughter sleep. Yes, I agreed, and so is the life we have built. Looking back on the journey from that fateful family dinner to the present, I can trace a path of pain, determination, achievement, and ultimately peace. My parents' words, "You don't deserve any help," once cut deeply enough to sever family bonds. Now they seem like unintentional catalysts for the life I was meant to create. The truth is, being cut off from family support forced me to develop strength, resilience, and self-reliance I might never have discovered otherwise. It pushed me to build connections based on genuine appreciation rather than obligation. It taught me the difference between help that nurtures dependency and support that empowers growth. Most importantly, it showed me that our worth isn't determined by others' assessment, even those who should love us most. Worth is inherent, undiminished by others' failure to recognize it. If my story resonates with you, perhaps you are facing your own version of family disappointment or rejection. Know this: what others withhold from you, approval, support, recognition, doesn't define what you can achieve or who you can become. Sometimes the people who refuse to help you are accidentally giving you the greatest gift of all: the chance to discover your own strength. I would love to hear your thoughts on family dynamics, overcoming rejection, or building success despite obstacles. Have you experienced similar situations? What helped you move forward? Drop a comment below. And if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by family approval. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, the family that matters most is often the one you build yourself, one meaningful connection at a time.